Good morning. Thank you for joining me today. This morning we'll be in Exodus chapter 12, verse 14 through chapter 13, verse 16. This day will become a memorial for you, and you will celebrate it as a festival to the Lord. You will celebrate it perpetually as a lasting ordinance. For 7 days you must eat bread made without yeast. Surely on the first day you must put away yeast from your houses, because anyone who eats bread made with yeast from the first day to the 7th day will be cut off from Israel. On the first day there will be a holy convocation, and on the 7th day there will be a holy convocation for you. You must not do work of any kind on them, only what every person will eat. That alone may be prepared for you. So you will keep the feast of unleavened bread, because on this very day I brought your regiments out from the land of Egypt, and so you must keep this day perpetually as a lasting ordinance. In the first month, from the 14th day of the month in the evening, you will eat bread made without yeast, until the 21st day of the month in the evening. For 7 days yeast must not be found in your houses, for whoever eats what is made with yeast, that person will be cut off from the community of Israel, whether a foreigner or one born in the land. You will not eat anything made with yeast. In all the places where you live, you must eat bread made without yeast. Then Moses summoned all the elders of Israel and told them, Go and select for yourselves a lamb or young goat for your families, and kill the Passover animals. Take a branch of hyssop, dip it in the blood that is in the basin, and apply it to the top of the doorframe and the 2 side posts, some of the blood that is in the basin. Not one of you is to go out of the door of his house until morning. For the Lord will pass through to strike Egypt, and when he sees the blood on the top of the doorframe and the 2 side posts, then the Lord will pass over the door, and he will not permit the destroyer to enter your houses to strike you. You must observe this event as an ordinance for you and for your children forever. When you enter the land that the Lord will give to you, just as he said, you must observe this ceremony. When your children ask you, What does this ceremony mean to you? Then you will say, It is the sacrifice of the Lord's Passover, when he passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt, and he struck Egypt and delivered our households. The people bowed down low to the ground, and the Israelites went away and did exactly as the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron. It happened at midnight. The Lord attacked all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sat on his throne, to the firstborn of the captive, who was in the prison, and all the firstborn of the cattle. Pharaoh got up in the night, along with all his servants and all Egypt, and there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was no house in which there was not someone dead. Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron in the night, and said, Get up, get out from among my people, both you and the Israelites. Go serve the Lord as you have requested. Also take your flocks and your herds, just as you have requested, and leave, but bless me also. The Egyptians were urging the people on, in order to send them out of the land quickly, for they were saying, We are all dead. So the people took their dough before the yeast was added, with their kneading troughs bound up in their clothing on their shoulders. Now the Israelites had done as Moses told them. They had requested from the Egyptians silver and gold items and clothing. The Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, and they gave them whatever they wanted, and so they plundered the Egyptians. The Israelites journeyed from Ramesses to Succoth. There were about 600,000 men on foot, plus their dependents. A mixed multitude also went up with them, in flocks and herds, a very large number of cattle. They baked cakes of bread without yeast, using the dough they had brought from Egypt, for it was made without yeast, because they were thrust out of Egypt and were not able to delay. They could not prepare food for themselves either. Now the length of time the Israelites lived in Egypt was 430 years. At the end of the 430 years, on the very day, all the regiments of the Lord went out of the land of Egypt. It was a night of vigil for the Lord to bring them out from the land of Egypt, and so on this night all Israel is to keep the vigil to the Lord for generations to come. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, This is the ordinance of the Passover. No foreigner may share in eating it, but everyone's servant who is bought for money, after you have circumcised him, may eat it. A foreigner and a hired worker must not eat it. It must be eaten in one house. You must not bring any of the meat outside the house, and you must not break a bone of it. The whole community of Israel must observe it. When a foreigner lives with you and wants to observe the Passover to the Lord, all his males must be circumcised, and then he may approach and observe it. And he will be like one who is born in the land, but no uncircumcised person may eat of it. The same law will apply to the person who is native born, and to the foreigner who lives among you. So all the Israelites did exactly as the Lord commanded Moses and Aaron. And on this very day the Lord brought the Israelites out of the land of Egypt by their regiments. The Lord spoke to Moses, "Set apart to me every firstborn male, the first offspring of every womb among the Israelites. Whether human or animal, it is mine." Moses said to the people, "Remember this day on which you came out from Egypt, from the place where you were enslaved. For the Lord brought you out of there with a mighty hand, and no bread made with yeast may be eaten. On this day, in the month of Abib, you are going out. When the Lord brings you to the land of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Hivites, and Jebusites, which he swore to your fathers to give you, a land flowing with milk and honey, then you will keep this ceremony in this month. For 7 days you must eat bread made without yeast, and on the 7th day there is to be a festival to the Lord. Bread made without yeast must be eaten for 7 days. No bread made with yeast shall be seen among you, and you must have no yeast among you within any of your borders. You are to tell your son on that day, 'It is because of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt.' It will be a sign for you on your hand, and a memorial on your forehead, so that the law of the Lord may be in your mouth. For with a mighty hand the Lord brought you out of Egypt. So you must keep this ordinance at its appointed time from year to year. When the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanites, as he swore to you and to your fathers, and gives it to you, then you must give over to the Lord the first offspring of every womb, every firstling of a beast that you have. The males will be the Lord's. Every firstling of a donkey you must redeem with a lamb, and if you do not redeem it, then you must break its neck. Every firstborn of your sons you must redeem. In the future, when your sons ask you, 'What is this?' you are to tell him, 'With a mighty hand the Lord brought us out from Egypt, from the land of slavery. When Pharaoh stubbornly refused to release us, the Lord killed all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of people to the firstborn of animals. That is why I am sacrificing to the Lord the first male offspring of every womb, but all my firstborn sons I redeem. It will be a sign on your hand, and for frontlets on your forehead, for with a mighty hand the Lord brought us out of Egypt." Yeah, so you have more description of the Passover with the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which I didn't realize that they were to eat it for a week there. For 7 days you must eat bread made without yeast. And yeah, yeast is supposed to represent sin. That is, they're not supposed to feed on sin anymore, but to depend on God. And it's interesting, you have the proclamation in there that yeast must not be found within your borders. And then, of course, you have the Passover sacrifice, which is this perfect lamb, which they are to take and to kill and to eat, and take some of the blood and apply it to their doorpost. Yeah, and then you have the Lord coming through and slaying every firstborn of the Egyptians there. And Pharaoh actually summoning Moses and Aaron and telling them to get up and go out, both you and the Israelites, to go and serve the Lord with the flocks and the herds. But bless me. Interesting. It's especially interesting because Afterwards, he again turns and regrets his decision and pursues Israel out into the wilderness and swept up in the Red Sea. But yeah, Pharaoh's a weird case. He likes to waffle on his decision to repent. Yeah, and then you have the length of time that the Israelites were in Egypt, 430 years. And at the end of that, they had 600,000 men on foot, plus their dependents. So, a great multitude. Hmm. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. Passover began on the 10th. On the 14th they ate the Passover, and this was the first day of unleavened bread. Then for the next 7 days they ate only unleavened bread. For the first Passover, the unleavened bread was a practical necessity. They left Egypt in such a hurry, there was no time to allow for the dough to rise. After the first Passover, the Feast of Unleavened Bread was a testimony throughout your generations. Leaven was also a picture of sin and corruption, because of the way little leaven influences a whole lump of dough, and also because of the way leaven puffs up the lump, even as pride and sin makes us puffed up. Significantly, God called them to walk unleavened after their initial deliverance from Egypt. Symbolically, they were being called to a life in moral purity before the Lord. Take a bunch of hyssop to apply the blood. They used hyssop to apply the blood to the doorposts and the lintel. Through the scriptures, hyssop was often used in applying blood for the cleansing of sin. An ordinance for you and your sons forever. The deliverance of Passover was not only for them, but also for their children, and all generations to follow. Passover was the greatest work of redemption performed on the Old Testament side of the cross. In the same way, Jesus gave the new Passover, saying that his work on the cross was not only for that generation, but should be remembered and applied to all generations. When he struck the Egyptians and delivered our households, in Passover, there was a twofold work. First, an enemy was defeated. He struck the Egyptians. Second, God's people were set free and given a new identity with new promises, a new walk, a new life altogether. So the people bowed their heads and worshipped. Rightfully, the immediate reaction of Israel to this announcement, before it actually happened, was worship. They honored the God who said he would do all this for them. Yeah, and this great deliverance for them was prophesied beforehand. The Lord struck all the firstborn in the land of Egypt. God told Moses that Pharaoh would not let them go until he was forced to by God's mighty works, and that this work would somehow touch the firstborn of Egypt. Now the situation unfolded just as God said it would. This plague was directed against two significant Egyptian gods. First, Osiris was the Egyptian god thought to be the giver of life. Second, this was against the supposed deity of Pharaoh himself, because his own household was touched. An inscription was found in a shrine connected with the Great Sphinx that records a solemn promise from the Egyptian gods vowing that Thutmose IV would succeed his father, Amenhotep II, whom many believe to be the Pharaoh of the Exodus. This unique, emphatic promise from the gods that something so natural would happen, that the eldest son would take his father's place as Pharaoh, was perhaps because Thutmose IV was not his father's firstborn son, and the firstborn was struck dead at the first Passover. Therefore they believed that the second-born son needed special protection from the gods, and the inscription sought to provide that. Interesting. So Pharaoh rose in the night, he and all his servants and all the Egyptians, and there was a great cry in Egypt. In dealing with Pharaoh, God first had to inform his mind, and then break his will. Pharaoh's problem wasn't that there was insufficient intellectual evidence. His heart had to be broken and made soft towards God. Egypt and Pharaoh would not give God his firstborn, Israel. So God took the firstborn of Egypt. Finally, Pharaoh knew that the Lord God was greater than all the Egyptian gods and was greater than Pharaoh himself, who was thought to be a god. Rise, go out from among my people. Pharaoh didn't simply allow Israel to leave. Now he commanded them to go. This was just what the Lord told Moses would happen. When he lets you go, he will surely drive you out of here altogether. Bless me also. This shows that now Pharaoh knew who the Lord was, the God who was greater than Pharaoh, and whom Pharaoh must seek for blessing. Pharaoh only came to this knowledge through being broken. Egyptians urged the people that they might send them out of the land in haste. They plundered the Egyptians. The Egyptian people also agreed that the Israelites must go, to the extent that they essentially paid the Israelites to leave. Therefore the children of Israel left in a hurry, so quickly that there was no time to let the bread rise. This is why they had to eat unleavened bread, as the Lord had commanded. We can imagine that some of the Israelites did not follow God's instruction to get all the leaven out. Now, because of the haste of their departure, they had to do what God had told them, because God arranged the circumstances so that they couldn't use leaven. In the same way, sometimes God arranges circumstances to where obedience is simply made necessary, even if we would not normally choose it. For example, God may want a man to give up friends that bring a bad influence, and the man finds that his friends leave him first. A mixed multitude went up with them. Not all of the 600,000 were Israelites. Many Egyptians, and perhaps other foreigners went with them, because the God of Israel demonstrated that he was more powerful than the God of the Egyptians. At the end of the 430 years on that very same day, apparently the exodus from Egypt began on the same calendar day as the 430th anniversary of Israel's time in Egypt. It's remarkable evidence that God often fulfills promises on anniversaries of prior or prophesied events. No foreigner shall eat the Passover. To share in it, one had to make themselves part of the people of Israel. Receiving the covenant of circumcision and taking Passover were all part of the same package. Consecrate to me the firstborn, it is mine. This was for 3 reasons. First, because Israel was God's firstborn, and this practice honored that fact. Second, because the firstborn was thought to be the best, and the best was always given to God. Finally, as a reminder to all generations of when God redeemed Israel, his firstborn from Egypt. It shall be a sign to you, on your hand, and as a memorial between your eyes. God wanted the deliverance from Egypt to be constantly at hand and before their eyes. The Jews used this passage, along with Deuteronomy 6:4-9, and 11:13-21, to institute the practice of wearing phylacteries, small boxes holding parchment with scriptures on them, held to the forehead or hand with leather straps. Later, Jesus condemned the abuse of the wearing of phylacteries among the Pharisees. They made their phylactery boxes large and ostentatious as a display of supposedly greater spirituality. That the Lord's law may be in your mouth. This shows that God did not command for literal boxes to be tied to the hands and forehead, because to take it in this way means that there should also be a phylactery box to put in the mouth. The very fact that language like this can be used of the Feast of Unleavened Bread shows it to be a pure metaphor. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining me today. Hope you have a great day. Bye.